Great. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Policy and Advocacy for Food Systems Change panel conversation hosted by the Wallace Center's Food Systems Leadership Network. I'm Annalena Kazikas with the Wallace Center, and I help coordinate the FSLN. I'm joined today by several of my colleagues, Melanie Edwards and Susan Schempf, and we are all so honored to have this incredible group of talented, driven, and really fun food systems leaders here with us to talk about their own journeys and experiences using policy for creating more equitable and just food systems. The Wallace Center's co-director, Susan, is going to kick us off in just a minute, but before we get started, Melanie and I are going to walk you through some quick housekeeping to get us settled. So,
yeah.
Here we go.
Thank you, Annalena, and good morning, everyone. We're so excited for you to be here. This training is being delivered and recorded through the Zoom webinar format. If you're having trouble with your audio, head on down to the bottom toolbar in your bottom left-hand corner and click on the little caret next to the headset icon, and you'll see several audio options. Join with computer. Audio is generally your best bet here. If you have any trouble, please feel free to send Annalena or myself a direct message, and we will do our best to try and help you. Thank you for all your thoughtful questions in the registration. We invite you to continue engaging by using the chat box to share reflections and comments, and the Q&A tool to ask more direct questions. We won't have a formal Q&A session, but we will do our best to weave the questions that you have in the chat into the conversation. So back over to Annalena to kind of guide us through the rest of the next part of this conversation.
Awesome. Thanks, Melanie. So for those of you who are new to the Food Systems Leadership Network, welcome. The FSLN is a national peer learning community of people and organizations across the country, like all of you here today, who are working towards more just, equitable, and sustainable food systems. The FSLN creates opportunities for food systems leaders to learn from and with each other and be connected into a variety of resources like mentorship, retreats, trainings, and topical calls. Today's conversation is the final piece of a three-part series that we've been hosting around using policy and advocacy to enact lasting systems change. Policy is an extremely powerful tool that creates the systems we live in and the rules we operate within. And by engaging in advocacy efforts, we really do have the power to shift policies and ensure that they're reflective of the assets, needs, and desires of our communities. But that's sometimes easier said than done. So this policy series has offered tips and tools for jumpstarting policy work. We kicked off the series with equity advocates who demystified political advocacy and shared strategies for meeting with lawmakers. And we're then joined by the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition for a Farm Bill 101 session. All of these recordings are available on the FSLN platform, and we'll be sharing links to all of that after this call, as well as a link to this webinar. So again, thank you all for being here, and we're really excited for this conversation today. And Melanie, I think we have a poll that you're going to lead us through.
Yes. So before we get started with our conversation today, we do have a brief poll that we would like you all to participate in. This will help us give us an idea of where everyone is in policy work. And so we're going to activate the poll, and there's a few different answers that you can select from. So, and this will give us a little better sense of who's in the room. So if you all wouldn't mind just taking a chance and answer the poll. If you, for some reason, can't use the poll, if you're like on your phone and maybe can't see it or can't respond, you're welcome to answer in the chat. And also, if there's something not on this list that you would like to see, please feel free to add that in the chat as well. So the results are coming in, and we'll share these results back with you in just a moment.
Awesome. Yeah, and thanks for all your participation. We have almost 80% of folks who've responded, and it's staying about the same. So I'm gonna go ahead and end the poll and share back the results with everyone. All right, let me know if you can see those. Cool. So it looks like most folks are in the pretty even distribution between local, grassroots level, municipal and county level, and state level policy work. A little bit less so in federal level, and not so many doing international policy, but that's fine. And welcome to folks who are just getting started. I think this is going to be a great intro conversation.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm going to stop sharing that, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen now.
Yeah, so we're going to hand this next part of the conversation over to Susan. Susan is our co-director of the Wallace Center, and she is going to get us started and guide us through the rest of today's conversation. So over to you, Susan.
Great. Thank you, Melanie and Annalena, and everyone for joining us today. It is such an honor to be able to moderate this conversation with three folks who I consider my heroes. I just have so much respect for the three of you, Paula Daniels, Kate Fitzgerald, and Savi Horne. Unfortunately, our fourth panelist today, Edna Rodriguez, is unable to attend due to a family emergency. So I'm sorry to share that news with all of you. We will have a surprise guest coming on in a few minutes, so I'll just keep you on your toes before she arrives. But I thought maybe we could just take a moment to send Edna some love and appreciation to her for her fierce work with the Rural Advancement Foundation International. Edna helped found the Farmers of Color Network and has just been doing some really incredible work in and around North Carolina for many years. So thought we could just take a breath and send her some love, and also just collectively give some thanks and gratitude to all of those leaders, both on this call and those who have passed on before, who've really committed their lives to shifting systems through policy advocacy. We indeed stand on the shoulders of giants. So let's just take a minute to send out some gratitude for those folks. Thank you. So our conversation today is really just meant to be that, a conversation, a dialogue amongst peers, and to share wisdom that you've gleaned over the many years that you've been involved in policy advocacy. We hope to hear about and learn from your journeys into this work, how you've handled the inevitable losses and kept at it for all these years, and then what you see as some of the most promising policy actions for our collective work in shifting food systems towards equity and sustainability. We hope to keep this really conversational, and just want to encourage y'all, Savi, Paula, and Kate, to just riff off each other, ask each other questions, and maybe we could imagine ourselves sitting at a dinner table, enjoying a meal, and sharing story about the work that we've done together. Yes, Savi, exactly. In New Orleans, a meal in New Orleans. Thank you. Which is where I'm located for those of you listening in. So why don't we kick off just with a question: how did y'all get involved into this work? And specifically, you know, as we're listening to you, who we look to as mentors, who have been your mentors along the way? Who have you looked to for guidance as you got involved in this work in policy? So Savi, do you want to kick us off?
It really goes way, way back. And I just want to welcome everyone, this meeting space. And I just feel a lot of gratitude for all of you committing your time to being with us. And just really just happy to see the numbers of you. And I'd like to acknowledge that I am here in Chapel Hill, Durham, which has been the Occaneechi-Saponi Nation land, and also a land of scarred with slavery, and one of the largest plantations in North Carolina was situated in Durham, Staggville. And very many African Americans in Durham could trace their roots back to that plantation, and even the settlements in and around Durham, which are now contested places for gentrification, were settled by some of the original families who were able to gain freedom and post emancipation settlements in and around Durham. And of course, strengthened by the post-civil rights movement of Black empowerment, and places where urban renewal just destroyed Black communities and Black wealth of Durham. So the process continues. Not many Black farmers are landowners in the county of Durham and Orange County, where I sit, because of land pressures here. And so it's with some heaviness that I approach this conversation, but there's also light. There are many young people in and around Durham and North Carolina who are actively engaged in food system change at their local level. The environmental justice community is still very strong here. And the local community economic development sector is still very present in the work here, even though there has been an attempt to silence their ability to meaningfully engage in their work with resources coming from the state of North Carolina. So I just want to welcome everyone, and I look forward to this dialogue with my sister friends in struggle. So yeah, and with the North Carolina Association of Black Lawyers Land Loss Prevention Project, which is based in Durham. Thank you. Kate.
Wow, that's hard to follow. So I am different from Savi in that Savi is really rooted in a place with very rich and often tragic history, but a place that's building back. And I feel as though my trajectory has been different because I grew up in inner city Philadelphia in the 1960s, actually in a neighborhood where the Black Panther Party did free breakfasts, but then ended up in Texas and sort of by accident got into this work because I was hired by the Texas Department of Agriculture. So I was an inner city kid, an inner city Yankee of all things, which is even worse, trying to talk about agriculture in Texas in the middle of the Farm Bureau. I mean, in the middle of the farm crisis. But what was, oh, Lorette is here. Hi, Lorette. But what was super exciting and the mentor I gained from that experience was I lucked out to be hired at a time when Jim Hightower was Commissioner of Agriculture and was trying to reinvent the whole approach to food farming and fiber and food distribution in the state. So early on, I lucked out to be taught that it's all linked. You can't separate access to food from the way food is grown and who grows it and at what price and how it gets to people. So that's been the trajectory from Philly to Texas and then now in DC, where I hope very much to be able to be helpful to people like you who are working at the grassroots, county, state level to try to translate what can often seem like a very complex system, but really is designed to hear people's ideas and to make the most of them. I'll leave it there. Paula?
Right. Well, amazing women to be here with, and thank you for gathering us. Thank you all for coming. I want to respond to that question of how I got involved in public policy and I guess who my inspiration was, because Friday will be my mother's 88th birthday. She's not on this earth anymore, but my mother was involved in politics and was a civil rights champion in Hawaii, where we're from. But I want to talk a little bit about how I got involved in public policy to begin with. I was an attorney, actually in private practice. It was how I was paying off my law school debts. And I was not engaged in public policy for a long time until I volunteered with a group in Southern California called Heal the Bay. And they had just recently been organized, and they were about ocean protection. And being from Hawaii and caring a lot about the ocean, I felt like this is something I wanted to help with. And I just really wanted to help out, do anything, grassroots organizing. I helped organize a protest march on the beach and did sign in, I was a partner in a law firm, and I organized a whole bunch of other people to come and help do sign-in sheets. And this woman named Dorothy Green, who was my first mentor in public policy, was the founder of Heal the Bay. And what I learned from her is that everybody can always make a difference all the time, because she found me at the registration table and said, "What do you do? You're a lawyer. We need lawyers. I need your help. Come on. I need it." So she gave me this whole sheaf of EIRs to review. And I said, "You know what? I don't really know this kind of law." She goes, "That's all right. Figure it out." And I sort of dove in and got a bunch of other lawyers to help out. And the long story short, I got very deeply involved in public policy around ocean protection, and kind of learned in my spare time how to do that work and what that meant. And a lot of what that meant was organizing, getting people organized, getting people to agreement. I ultimately became chair of the board of Heal the Bay, and that led to me being appointed to various public positions in California around water policy. At the same time, my mother was running for elected office in Hawaii, and was going back to a career that had been interrupted when she got married to have kids and in the 50s, and then came back to that career. And what I learned from Dorothy Green is that everybody can make a difference all the time, and she's fiercely creative about that. What I learned from my mother is to always follow your own North Star. My mother believed in public policy. She always said that if you care about your family, you have to care about politics, because politics influences so many lives. Doctors can save people, but they save people one at a time. Public policy can impact a lot of people all at once, and we're certainly seeing how that's the case. So she always believed in being very active and championing the civil rights of all. So in their honor, I am here today.
Wow. Thank you. Oh, it's just so incredible to think about how many amazing women have been at the forefront of this work. And we have our surprise guest arrived, Lorette Picianno from Rural Coalition, who is certainly amongst peers here. Lorette, you've been doing work for decades around policy advocacy through the Rural Coalition. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we were just chatting about how we got into the work. So can you share a little bit of your story, and maybe those that you've looked to for mentorship and guidance in your career in this work?
Well, I grew up in upstate New York in a place called Broome County, which is unfortunately in the news this week. And I went to, and that's another story, the College of Agriculture at Cornell University, and was an in-state student. My family had come from Italy and never had land in this country, but we had the love of agriculture. And then I did my master's degree in Hawaii at University of Hawaii and East West Center. So Paula will have to talk more, and learned a lot there, and kind of the first advocacy as I went to the Philippines and came back about the conditions in the Philippines. And so that was kind of the first, joining Friends of the Filipino People was maybe some of my first activism. I came to DC in 1979. So I've worked on all the farm bills since 1981. And I started working with Bread for the World, looking at international hunger issues and, an international grain reserve. And, a lot of the politics there, which were kind of like supply management and those sets of issues. But then I got into the farm crisis when I moved over to Interfaith Action for Economic Justice. And I worked throughout the farm crisis with the interfaith community around the country. And there was a whole network of people. So my teachers were Luann Kling, who was the founder of Farmers Legal Action Group, and Mona Lee Brock and Max Glenn in Oklahoma, who, did all kinds of relief about, there were farm suicides going on. And, Luann took us through the whole way USDA works when she was there in the Clinton administration. She taught us about county committees and all the ways that injustice is generated. I began working with the Federation of Southern Cooperatives, John Zippert, who recruited me and demanded I come to the Rural Coalition some 30 years ago, and Ralph Page and Shirley Sherrod. And, this was the team that we worked through with all this time and, with the Rural Coalition. So those are my teachers in connecting to policy. And, it's like Paula, the image that comes to me is you catch a wave and you don't know where it's going to take you. But, that's how it starts. It starts with relationships and these cohorts of relationships that we built with everybody. Kate, we've been knowing you. And of course, my colleague and dear sister, Savi, couldn't have done this work without her. And we learn every day from all of our member groups around the country. So just keep building networks is, I think, the kind of biggest story.
I kind of have to jump in on that since you talked about catching a wave, because I've often felt like being involved in this work is like catching a wave, but you kind of have to be in the water. You just need your equipment, your board, and you have to be in the water and kind of know there's waves there. But it's pretty random how things happen, but you have to kind of seize that moment when the wave comes and paddle and catch it, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
And be willing.
Timing is everything.
Right. And it's sometimes a very, 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 very long wave.
Wait, exactly. There might not be any waves, but at least you're in the water.
Well, and don't give up. And also, start paddling your board in the direction you want to go.
Exactly.
We have a couple staff people. It's like, no, we really want to be with the Rural Coalition. I'm like, okay, we'll listen.
As a surfer, I'm really digging this metaphor. So thank you. I want to get into the deep end with y'all now. So, I'm curious, you talk about the long wave. Kate, inevitably this work, it is fast paced, it's complicated, and frankly, it's oftentimes really frustrating. So I'm curious, given that a lot of the time we don't get what we want when it comes to policy advocacy. It's a long, hard fight. What's one of the hardest lessons that you've learned? What have you learned from one of the times that it hasn't worked in your favor?
There's always something that's positive, even out of every loss. So I'm not going to accept that we have, as a movement, suffered big losses, because I do think that you have to look at a long trajectory. I mean, it took over 100 years. It took hundreds of years to build the food system that didn't work for all of us. It is not unreasonable to think that it's going to take a couple of generations to fix it. I think I really lucked out by meeting Jim Hightower when I was young and impressionable, because he's now well into his 70s and is absolutely indefatigable and always positive and always excited, because he's always on the road meeting smart, new, young, energetic people. So the idea is you just have to get up. Every day is a new day. It's like democracy. It is never ended. The work is constant. It's ongoing. The scene is always changing. So one just has to be resilient, and there's always a win. I mean, even if we don't get everything we want, there's always a kernel of something good.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think public policy is about organizing at its core. It's about getting agreement on what objectives are, and then getting agreement from those who can make the decisions on doing it. And that agreement isn't just among a few people, it's always among a lot. So if it doesn't work out, it just tells me usually that there's another time and place and opportunity. So I'm thinking of that question. I can't think of anything I would characterize as a loss, just like maybe not this time, but we will keep trying and keep thinking it's a problem to solve. And how do we keep solving that problem? Who did we not convince this time that we need to try to convince next time? Or can we vote somebody else into office who will make that decision better than the last one? So it's not a loss, it's just a matter of timing. As we were talking about with the survey, it's just a matter of timing.
Well, you know, I have to kind of agree with Kate that, you know, it's a progression, and, you know, they heard the, you know, creating a new society in the shell of the old, and a new food system in the shell of the old. However, I'm probably more worried about this farm bill than I've ever been worried. We've always been able to make progress. You know, we have the term socially disadvantaged farmers, which people don't like, but it's the definition of discrimination, and it's what's actually redirected a lot of money to the farmers that we serve over these years. But one of our biggest challenges in the last year was about a year ago at this time, when Stephen Miller and Mark Meadows and the America First Foundation filed a lawsuit to stop the debt relief that was in the American Rescue Plan. And if you think about it, $4 billion would have paid off all the debt for all the BIPOC farmers in the country out of a total loan portfolio that is much larger. And they sued on behalf of the Ag Commissioner of Texas, Sid Miller, who, yes, it goes back to Texas. And, you know, I love Jim Hightower, and, you know, and a lot of the colleagues around him are amazing people. But, you know, that he wasn't able as a white farmer to get into this loan payoff, and it was only based on race. I would not have written the legislation like that, because we've always, you know, said there has to be a share that goes to this group of farmers. And, you know, we were worried about the constitutionality, but on the other hand, now we stand to, you know, the definition is at risk, and the debt has not been paid. And we have the farmers that have been sitting for a year not knowing what to do, and USDA unable to give them any clear guidance. And what you see is there's a larger society that is not into equity. And we're going to really have to think about how to reframe this. But what we also know is we're running out of farmers. Silicon Valley is going to be playing more than they ever did. But, you know, is Bill Gates really going to be able to farm from, you know, his tech headquarters? And so land is also at risk in this farm bill. So it's like we make forward progress, but we have to look at the whole frame of things. We can't forget the forest for the trees.
And I would say we're definitely having bad weather right now. There's no question about it. Prepare ourselves for that.
Yeah.
Savi?
Yeah, it's Savi. I just want to jump in and let everyone know that my internet is very unstable, so I'm getting a lot of static and not hearing. But, you know, and David Beck, I just want you to thank you for putting that word balance in the chat when you hit the wave. You got to remember the balance. And I think when I look back in time, what was different in the civil rights litigation period as opposed to where we're at today, given the type of litigation that BIPOC farmers are facing that's blocking their access to critical resources at this particular juncture. And I think about that we would not have gotten anywhere with the court system if the community had not been organized. And so it took a robust base of people actively engaged, whether it's protests or local policy, speaking out, sit-ins, whatever means it took, they were engaged and pushing against forces that sought to stay in place in the status quo and continue to benefit from the labor of BIPOC people across the country, with the blunt of it facing rural communities and particularly impacting farmers. So I feel for every farm bill wins, Lorette, once we had that engagement of grassroots and the action alerts and people just staying on it and the fly-ins, we really saw a difference. And right now, I would agree that we're not seeing that yet. And maybe people are thinking, you know, we still have time to organize. And I don't really see that, because given where we're at in this pandemic, where the economy is, where the Supreme Court is, we have to, it has to be a process that is dedicated, and you keep pressing forth and organized on multiple levels of engagement, because not just one will win it. And we have to deal with our communities at local level to organize there. We see this mid-term primaries in North Carolina. Well, it's up and down in terms of who could basically win in November, and some of it is scary. And all I can say is that if we don't stay grounded in the principal work that we do, and respect community and work with community, because communities are already organized coming out of COVID, because they had to organize in order to get to a place of resiliency. So you already have that piece in place, which we hadn't had before in a long time. And, you know, we saw it with a project that the World Coalition led with Ladera's Campesinas and others from California around just even the COVID outreach and how community got engaged. And once you are talking about COVID, you can get to talk about other issues that are impacting people's lives, right? The climate change, the structural racism. How do we deal with all of this and be in a place where we can protect our health? So I think we face a lot of obstacles, but I just want to just stay in a place, and maybe I'm putting my head down in the sand. I've been accused of that, and that's probably the case. But I want to say we have a momentum around COVID in a lot of our communities. And given the impact of the climate change, people are moving, the base is energized, and we just really need people to really focus on the Farm Bill itself and what needs to happen to move the larger pieces forward.
Yeah, well, thank you for that just encouragement to keep on keeping on and stay in the water. I feel like that's a message that all of us need to hear, because I know people are weary. It's been a really tough few years. And there's been, you know, some real hard hits. So people have lost a lot of family and community members. So it's been tough. And there's also, it feels like there's so many different issues that are intersecting, that maybe this is the time for us as a kind of food systems movement to help make the case of how food is so intersectional with all of these other issues of environmental justice, climate justice, reproductive justice. And we've got to unite across all of these different movements to really be able to mobilize in the way that you're describing, Savi. So I feel like that's a real call to action for all of us to be building relationships and allies with folks that are working in other spaces that aren't as like explicitly focused on food, because we know food is the thing that connects all of these different issues. So I know that's really lighting a fire under me to seek out those other allies that we can be working with. So why don't we shift and talk a little bit more about those current or just stay on this wave here around current opportunities for activism and impact. I'm curious to hear, you know, what are you looking at? What are you excited about? What do you see happening right now that you think that we should really jump on? But before we do that, let's see what the audience thinks. Melanie and Annalena, y'all have another poll we were going to launch here?
Yes, I'm going to send that right now.
All right, so folks, if there was one federal policy action that we could all focus on right now and make a big shift in, what would you choose? We've got some awesome options here, but also know that this is not an exhaustive list. So if you have other ideas, please put them in the chat box. And just curious to see where the energy is at within this group. I'll give another minute or so for folks to respond. It's a hard choice. Okay,
All right.
Annalena, you want to close it? We have about 2/3 of folks responding.
Yep, here we go.
All right, so the energy's on increased farm bill funding for local and regional food systems. Kate, I know that that's something that you've really been paying attention to. Do you want to kick us off? What are you excited about? Where do you think there's the greatest opportunity right now that we should all be working on? Is it farm bill? Is that where we need to be putting our energy?
Geez, first of all, I think that one can look at all of those options, maybe with the exception of universal free school meals, but school meals, you can look at school meals, you can look at debt relief for BIPOC farmers, you can look at debt relief for beginning farmers and local and regional food systems and put them together if it works well. If local and regional food systems work well, they can help ease the other strains, right? If farmers are earning more money because they're getting paid fair prices, it is easier to pay off their debt. They're not going to be underwater all the time. If there is a supply chain to get product to local and regional schools, you're going to get better meals in the schools, keep more of those dollars locally, help build the base for the schools and the school meal programs. I think that the farm bill is going to be super important. I agree with Lorette that there are some serious challenges there. The thing that's most immediately exciting to me is the action we're seeing from USDA to push out money into the supply chain to try to build both the infrastructure that's been missing, particularly for meat, slaughter, possibilities and distribution, to deconcentrate the meat supply chain. And then also now the funding going to states to buy local food with an emphasis on buying from BIPOC producers to be distributed through emergency food systems and to local schools. I think that USDA is really trying hard with the funding that they do have to push dollars out to make up for the big hit they got from not being able to eliminate the debt for the BIPOC producers. So in terms of immediate action, I mean, there's $600 million flowing out to states and tribal communities. USDA is doing it in a way that is much more flexible than any of their traditional grant programs. It will be up to communities engaged with their state and tribal agencies to ensure that every one of those $600 million is used in the best possible way, so that at the end of a couple of years, when the money is spent, we will have more of an infrastructure to support sustainable local and regional food systems into the future, but also have provided some serious market support for BIPOC producers, serious market support for beginning and other socially disadvantaged farmers, good, healthy food for schools. So that would be my hope. So I think that the potential is enormous. This is more money than this sector has ever seen. It's an order of magnitude larger than all of the grant programs for local and regional put together. So the potential is great, but it's up to us to ensure that the spending is done well.
And just to quickly clarify, Kate, you're speaking about the local food purchase assistance program and the local food for schools program. Okay.
Yeah,
and a couple of other ones.
We have some things we're working on specifically in California that is a new idea in trying to create an incentive fund for schools. So California last year passed a universal meals program, school meals program. And I think for those of you who don't know, the Center for Good Food Purchasing has a rating system for large food service institutions, many of which are school districts. And we do the demand side management. We try to direct their purchasing towards support of local economies, environmental sustainability, fair labor, animal welfare, and nutritional health. So we have a budget request in. California currently has a $91 billion budget surplus. There's a lot of ideas for how to spend that, as you can imagine, but we have one, which is to provide an incentive like a 10 to 25% supplement to school districts who want to improve their scores or improve their purchasing in areas where they're not doing as well. So if they want to improve their environmentally sustainable purchasing, if regenerative ag is available in that area, they would have that supplement. It's an opt-in grant program that they can show how they would do it, how they would use the money, and then have that supplement available to them. So we're hoping for that. At the same time, so this is what I would call reordering subsidies. I saw some folks saying there needs to be a reduction of commodity subsidies. I would say this is reordering subsidies. So let's put the public dollars where we know we want public good to be served. And that would be in the area of supporting local and smaller farmers, BIPOC farmers, environmental sustainability, fair labor, all of those areas. And part of what we're also looking at, and I think it's kind of a good public policy argument, is true cost accounting. In other words, highlighting the externalities in food. And so as you point that out in studies, and we did one on school meals, you can start making the case for if you make these shifts, here's the positive benefits you can get. And therefore, this is why we need to support these incentive funds. We'll see how it goes in California. Fingers crossed. There's always, if it doesn't happen this year, there's always another time. And on the federal level, I think it'd be great to start getting values-based purchasing into federal programs as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to jump in and also say, I think that true cost accounting study, and I hope, Paula, you'll share that with us, is an excellent
Sure,
piece.
I'll put it in the chat right now, actually.
Thank you. And, we have to be thinking about those things. But I think Kate was also mentioning, in addition to the local food, there was a big technical assistance grants that were given. There were 20 given, including to Rural Coalition and Land Loss Prevention and a number of our other groups, to basically get together and try and get information out to the farmers who had the debt relief stop. But not only that, on the, kind of providing farmers with the technical assistance they need to actually navigate programs, because there's way too many programs, and it's really hard for a small farmer to navigate. And the thing we noticed that was different between this and the vaccine outreach program, Rural Coalition got half of an $8 million grant that was for a 7-month project to bring vaccine outreach. And we worked in over 200 highly vulnerable, according to the CDC index, rural counties, and reached 1.3 million people. We worked with 15 of our member groups and hired 214 people among all of us just in our half of the grant. Wow. What we found is people were enthused. They reported every 2 weeks. The metrics became, but what also they got something that was important, which was the vaccines out to their communities. And I think in agriculture, the farmers are unable to see what's going to be the immediate return, and it's a lot harder. Mm-hmm. But one thing we learned is by having this together, we weren't competing against each other. We were learning and doing things together. And, it's been replicated in this TA approach. The problem with the small climate smart round, which we don't like the term climate smart, is again, you're going to have groups competing against each other, but USDA is putting out more money than it ever has. And I agree with Kate, we've got to use that to our benefit. We also have to start thinking of the framing of this farm bill. We desperately need more farmers. We need neighborhood agriculture. We need, and I think the local food investments are important because we need to reorient this entire food system. So it's that building a new shell. I went through the 2008 Farm Bill where it was get rid of commodity subsidies. And what it became is an anti-farmer debate. And then what did you get? To have better products like what? Specialty crops. Who are the specialty crop producers? They are the largest, most water consuming, most farm worker exploiting producers in the country. And isn't there another way to get fresh fruit and vegetables that don't mean they have to go all the way across the country? And so we have to think of the structural things, but we need more farmers. We need more of our communities connected to land. When we're thinking about climate, there's a lot of risks also there and in forestry, because if we start doing carbon credits, carbon ecological services payments, it puts a value into the land. And Silicon Valley and teachers' pensions are all starting to invest in land, and they're showing up in our communities and buying the land. So I think we always have to look at the dangers. And the other thing is, it's kind of like martial arts and, where you push. And a lot of times the things we do under the radar screen, like the local food, like the school lunches, those are things that are transformative, and we have to build the power to fight for those things, but also to stop the bad things and be careful in how we say what we say. Oh, and then the other thing that we ended up with is we ended up with a lot more crop insurance. We cut back some subsidies, and now we have a huge crop insurance that is not protecting resilience, and we need to work in that area more too.
Savi, I wonder if you could speak to that point that Lorette was just raising about access to land and kind of inspiring a new generation of farmers to get rolling. Like, what do you see as the real policy actions that need to happen to address those really critical challenges?
Well, yeah, and I've been thinking about land access and what we're going to do about that. And of course, young farmers and the Federation are working together on a critical piece, but historically the Rural Coalition, Land Laws, and the Federation have had initiatives around increasing land access for African American and other minority farmers. And we saw it on the Vilsack 1 because he spoke to increasing the number of farmers then and increase in land access for the next generation, the new and beginning farmer. And that is still the problem that we are confronting. If we have farmers on the land, taking care of the land in a sustainable way, and community actively engaged in resiliency work and local food economy work, for me, that's one way that you can deal with the imminent dangers that could come from carbon trading and land concentration or land grabbing by pension funds, and the very wealthy 1% of the country decided, well, maybe they needed to edge their bet against a Mars or moon colony by buying up vast acreages of land for future use, of which you don't really know, but we know they know nothing about agriculture, and we're not about contract ag on large tracts of farms. That is, we're not going down that road again, right? We've learned from the farm worker movement that we're not about the factories in the farm anymore, and that we have to put strong legislation, antitrust that needs to be worked on to deal with the contract ag in the pork and poultry and animal feedlot industry. We see what concentration, the negative effects of that, where under the Trump administration, multinational, strong, concentrated agriculture law firm basically called the shot on whether workers could get access to vaccine or whether they could stay home when they're sick. And so now, as all of this is coming to the fore in terms of public opinion, we need to make sure that we have in the Farm Bill strong policies that would prevent that type of forum shopping, either trying to shop a deal with the Secretary of Ag or the White House that disadvantaged communities and farm workers and BIPOC farmers. So I think there's a lot of heavy lifting in the policy arena that could shape how we can deal with some of these weightier issues, but we have to really prioritize what we can work on. And because at the same time we're working, we have to have an energized and mobilized base on these issues. I recall I was on, I think it was Wisconsin Public Radio back in last year, and we were talking before these lawsuits, and it really did give me a sense of foreboding because there were farmers calling, well, this is reverse discrimination, this emergency relief for BIPOC. I'm a white woman farmer. I've never discriminated against anyone. So I think the handwriting is on the wall. It's, in terms of where the country is heading, in terms of the attack on rights of minority and BIPOC farmers to survive in a richly engaged agriculture, and as well as a rollback on civil rights protection. So they are organizing their base, and we need to double up our efforts that goes beyond just trying to get our candidates elected, but really base building to change some of these state legislatures and these really bad coalition of people that will impact our lives forever as we consciously know it.
Mm-hmm. So what does that look like, y'all? How can we be more connected and collaborative to mobilize the base across the country? Like, what does that look like for more organizations like ours and those that are a part of this call today to work together? Where do you see those opportunities for collaboration?
Absolutely. I think that is the point of, I feel, why we're on this in this virtual community right now, is to recognize the challenges and the need to work together in a very transparent way. We have attempted to work together on surface of things that were not always transparent, but this one needs to be different. And we need to together from now. I mean, it's a little almost too late. And I think we need to build trust. And at times we need to, give way to the expertise of certain members of the group to concentrate effort on, say, land rights, farm worker protection, environmental stuff around this new agriculture that's afoot, this climate-friendly piece, and to work on the community resiliency piece to ensure that communities can survive while climate change is afoot. So I think this might be one of those rare moments where the environmental, the large enviros might, because they're pretty much well oiled from all this money that's out there, that they might be able to step back and see that their very future depends on broad-based collaboration. So I'm hoping that they will see that, but I think it's not just the food system folk that need to work together. It's a much broader coalition of people that need groups that need to come together.
And it's also the channeling of, where you have a lot of groups that will not talk on any other equity issue or something that's not in their frame. And I think this is the time that everybody has to stand up and has to be talking about racial justice and has to be talking about, the consequences. But more than that, could we come up with something together that also can show what the advantages and what the essential nature of stopping this exclusion of the culturally rich and multi-fabric communities if everybody was allowed to flourish? Like, how can we build a larger proposition that, we need agriculture, we need the knowledge if we're ever going to heal this planet, and, just to get beyond, because this whole thing is about like the sharing of resources, and we get stuck in that too. Like, we compete with each other. And really, this time we're going to have to collaborate, and we're going to have to see it as a long-term struggle. We're going to have to take a few steps at a time. But what is our larger frame? What is our vision? What is our vision of an equitable food system?
Yeah, before I got into food policy, I sort of skipped it over really quickly, but I was very involved in water policy for about 20 years. And collaboration was always complicated in that area as well. But ultimately, we've talked about surfing as an analogy, which is a solo sport, but shift to a team sport. So when we're talking about organizing here, what's really important is to think about how to mesh together. So what are different folks doing? Understand what they're doing, understand how that moves the whole ball forward, and which are the assets of each player in the field, like who's good at this part, who's good at that part, and how do we support that? And one way to start thinking about things too is to think about where you might be best to lead, or you or your organization, where you might be best to support, where you might be best to sort of participate as a thought partner, but you don't lead on everything. Somebody else might be leading. So how do we make sure we're lifting each other up together is a big organizational feat. And it does take some leadership. And generally, I like to think of having a strategic goal that helps to advance the larger goal. I was mentioning true cost accounting, which I think is a helpful goal. One, David Beck and I have been talking about a job study, to your point, Lorette, about showing how this is important to change the economic fabric of our country. So we have one argument, obviously one argument's about the true costs, the externalized costs. Another argument is what kind of jobs can we create in this more equitable food system so we can make that case, and what other sorts of ways can we point this out so we can just continue to help weave in all the different efforts into one movement.
Yeah, and we often talk in teams. So we have teams, not working groups. And you bring teams together, and usually it's like, there's not like one coordinator. It's like, a consolidated effort. And one way to also think about it is, where do we populate each other geographically? Because the notion of, we organize in Oklahoma and other places that are really critical. And we have to think about valuing each player, valuing the particular knowledge that they have, the respect of checking with the people that really know the set of issues. So we're going to talk to Kate if it's about local food. Paula, we're going to talk to you on on good food purchasing. We respect each other. We're going to talk to Savi on heirs property and, the places where there's a depth of knowledge and credit in those issues.
Yeah, that's a good approach.
Well, and I love what you said, Lorette, just about, and I think all of you touched on this, of really setting forth an irresistible vision for the future that can unite across all of these different issue areas to say what it is that we do want to be building. And I'm just really compelled by that idea of how might we create something that others are so attracted to that it really helps to forge the kind of change that we want to see. I can't believe we're already at time. That went by so fast. And I just want to quickly ask y'all, since we're right at time, maybe you could take 30 seconds each and just send off some closing words of encouragement. What do you want to really impress upon the 180 something people that are still here today, and those that will be listening later? What do you want them to walk away with? Just a couple of words of encouragement, and then we'll close out. Jump in as the Spirit leads you.
Just think everybody just has to keep the faith. We've been in rough places before, and we've managed to pull through, sometimes in the hardest times. The best of us thinking universally comes out.
I've always been inspired by a saying from Martin Luther King. There's a bunch, but one of them is, even if I know the world would end tomorrow, I'd still plant my apple tree today. And I don't think we're yet in that spot, but that is about relentless optimism. And I that was a lesson from my mother, and that's something that I think we can all, I guess, internalize. Life is a journey, it's not a destination, and I think that's true for public policy as well. It's a continual journey, so just keep up the good work.
I just want to note in the chat, that we're talking about being in a culture where white supremacy is more evident than ever before, and we're going to be fighting a different battle than we've ever fought. And so everybody who's on here, what we need to do is create a vision for what is the alternative, what is it that we actually want to build? How do we take and value, and what are we passionate about? Because we have to be, you have to be against something, but how do you move forward and create something new out of, the shell of where we are right now? And to me, part of that means getting every piece of land reconnected to somebody that knows how to take care of it, because we also have to heal the climate. So we have more dangers, but the opportunity we have is to work together really, really hard and to create something new and together.
Savi?
I really do believe that we have to keep the eyes on the prize, is that collectively we can make another world possible. And we can do that by really coming to terms with some of the legacy discrimination issues that would even survive climate change, because we're still sitting with it throughout, and that as a country, people need to come to grips with what the dislocation of systemic racism and its impact across the board, not only on the skewing of wealth and disparity, but also on the environment. And even nowadays, how we even teach in schools. So there's like a full court press, but I think at every historical moment, when our backs is against the wall, we pull through, because we were centered on creating a just world so that people can thrive in their community, live, work, and play, breathe air, have access to land, grow food. And so I just think we need to, hold on to the basic stuff that we need as human beings, not the accumulative stuff that's creating all this climate change, but basically, what can I do without to ensure, like Mother Jones had once said, live simply so that others can simply live. But at that token, we can't turn a blind eye to racism and its ills, because we still got to work at that. So I think we stay grounded in the reality of creating justice and peace in the world, balanced with the need to deal with systemic barriers to human progress on the planet. So yeah, I leave you all with a charge, but also feeling good that we can do this, y'all.
We can do this, y'all. Yes.
I really do believe that. I really do.
Wow. Well, thank you all so much from the depths of my heart. I'm so grateful.
I have a part 2 to this conversation.
We should.
We didn't have enough time to really dig in and really even deal with some of the chats that's coming through. And so I'm voting and putting strength behind the Wallace Center doing a part 2 later this summer.
We can do that. I can commit to making that happen. Well, thank you all so much. This has been such a nourishing, motivating conversation. I am really just inspired to stay in the water with y'all. And I'm excited to keep working with you. Thank you, everybody, for joining this conversation today, for listening in. I hope that it's also been inspiring and motivating for you. We have just one quick question. If we could ask those of you that are still with us, if you could answer this last poll just to give us a little bit of feedback on your experience today. If you could just answer that before you head out. And I just want to thank our friends, Savi, Lorette, Kate, and Paula. Thank you so much for being a part of this conversation and for the incredible work that you do and that you have been doing and that you're going to continue doing. And thank you, Annalena and Melanie, for being such amazing hostesses and holding this webinar space so well. So thanks, everybody. And from the Food Systems Leadership Network and the Wallace Center, we'll see you in the wave.
Thank you all for making this possible. And I want to especially give a shout out to my sister friend, Lorette, for jumping in the last minute and making the space. And just thank everyone for the richness of this and the hope that we're leaving this space with, and the remix.
Right.
Yes.
Agreed, Savi.
My joy. And Paula, we have to talk story.
Yeah.